There's a strip of copper you can buy for under $25 that outperforms the pesticide sprays sold by a global industry worth over $70 billion a year. Not almost as good, not comparable, measurably, provably better at the specific problem it is designed to solve. It does not wash away in rain. It does not need to be reapplied every week. It does not require a warning label about keeping children and pets off the lawn for 48 hours. Cornell University's integrated pest management program has documented it. The University of California's official pest management guidelines recommend it by name. And yet, if you walk into any garden center in America today, you will find an entire aisle of sprays, pellets, and systemic treatments before you find a single copper strip. It removes slugs, it removes snails, it disrupts the ant highways that protect aphid colonies from the beneficial insects trying to control them. The global crop protection chemical market generates somewhere between $70 and $85 billion annually. Bayer, Syngenta, Corteva, Scotts, Miracle-Gro, all of them need you to open a new bottle next season. A copper strip that lasts years does not fit that model. They did not forget this existed. That would be an accident. They buried it. That was not an accident. It was a decision. This is the story of copper and zinc barriers, what they do to slugs and snails at the electrochemical level, and why a method documented by 2 major land-grant universities was never supposed to reach your raised bed. Welcome back to Science of Survival, where we open the vaults. Hit subscribe and the bell if you're not already in. In the Nile Delta, around 1550 BCE, Egyptian physicians and agricultural workers were already handling copper with a sophistication that modern chemistry has only recently begun to fully appreciate. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest and most comprehensive medical and agricultural documents in the ancient world, dated to approximately 1550 BCE and discovered at Luxor in 1873, records copper compounds being applied to wounds, to soils, and to stored materials to prevent decay and infestation. These were not superstitious rituals. They were the recorded observations of practitioners who noticed, across generations, that copper did something to living things that nothing else quite replicated. Grain stored near copper vessels stayed intact longer. Treated surfaces resisted the rot and infestation that destroyed everything else. The mechanism was unknown to them. The results were not. 15 centuries passed before anyone outside the Mediterranean world documented a similar discovery in writing. Then, in the 1st century CE, the Roman natural philosopher Pliny the Elder compiled his encyclopedic work, Naturalis Historia, finished around 77 CE, in which he described the use of copper salts and mineral compounds in Roman agriculture. Roman farmers, working vineyards and orchards across the empire, had independently arrived at many of the same conclusions as the Egyptians. Copper-treated materials resisted disease and certain infestations in ways that untreated materials did not. Pliny recorded these observations not as folk wisdom, but as practical agricultural fact, the kind of working knowledge that passed through generations of Roman farm management. 2 civilizations, separated by over 1,000 years of time and hundreds of miles of sea, each documented the same core observation. Copper changes. What happens at the boundary between a living organism and a surface? 17 centuries after Pliny, in the vineyards of Bordeaux, France, in the 1880s, a botanist named Alexis Millardet noticed something unusual. Vines along the roadsides, the ones that farmers had sprayed with a mixture of copper sulfate and lime to discourage passers-by from eating the grapes, were surviving a devastating mildew outbreak that was destroying vineyards across the region. The untreated vines died. The copper-treated ones did not. Millardet recognized what he was seeing, conducted controlled experiments, and by 1885 had documented and published what became known as Bordeaux mixture, the first scientifically characterized copper-based agricultural treatment in the modern era, and a compound that remained in active use for well over a century. Egypt, Rome, Bordeaux. 3 cultures, 3 continents, thousands of years apart, all arriving at the same material. That is not coincidence. That is copper's chemistry doing exactly what copper's chemistry does. The specific mechanism that makes copper effective against slugs and snails was rigorously characterized in peer-reviewed research, with Cornell University's integrated pest management program among the institutions that documented and published the explanation. The University of California's IPM program, one of the most authoritative pest management bodies in the country, has formally incorporated it into official recommendations. Here is what happens at the surface level. Slug and snail locomotion depends on a mucus, commonly called slime, that the animal secretes as it moves. That slime is not inert. It is a biological fluid with measurable electrical conductivity. When that conductive slime makes contact with a copper surface, it initiates an electrochemical reaction. Copper ions transfer across the boundary between the metal and the mucus. Those ions interact with the slug's sensory and nervous systems, producing a response that researchers have compared to a mild electric shock, immediate, aversive, and powerful enough to reverse the animal's direction of movement entirely. The slug does not push through it. The slug does not habituate to it. The slug turns around. Research cited by Cornell, including work by Shooter and colleagues in 2002, confirmed copper matting reduced slug and snail invasion in horticultural settings. Earlier documented work by Sakovic in 1996 showed copper barriers reducing brown garden snail invasion in citrus orchards. The drop in pest crossing was not gradual. It was not marginal. At the barrier itself, it was immediate and it was total. There is a secondary mechanism worth understanding, and it operates at the level of garden ecology rather than individual pest behavior. Ants and aphids have a documented mutualistic relationship. Ants actively protect aphid colonies from predators like ladybugs and parasitic wasps in exchange for the sugary secretion aphids produce called honeydew. When a copper barrier disrupts ant movement through a garden bed, that protection breaks down. Aphid colonies that were previously shielded become accessible to the beneficial insects that would naturally control them. The copper is not killing aphids. It is removing the ant-based security force that kept the aphids untouchable. This is the kind of layered ecological thinking that a spray bottle cannot replicate, because a spray bottle kills indiscriminately and resets to zero every time it rains. Copper and zinc are also recognized essential micronutrients for plants.
Copper supports enzyme systems, photosynthesis, and lignin synthesis. Zinc supports hormone regulation, enzyme activation, and root development. In soils that are genuinely deficient in these minerals, the presence of copper and zinc components in the garden can contribute to plant vigor. Most people walk past this solution every single day without any idea what it can do. The ones who find out tend to make sure the people they care about find out too. So why is this not on the shelf of every garden center in America, clearly labeled, prominently placed, and recommended by every extension program in the country? Here's what a $70-2-80-5 billion industry looks like. Bayer Crop Science, Syngenta, Corteva Agriscience Corporation, Scott's Miracle-Gro, Bonid Products. These are the companies whose products dominate the garden pest control market. Their business model is not a secret.
You cannot patent copper. It is an element. You cannot trademark the electrochemical reaction between slug slime and a metal strip. You cannot build a subscription around a piece of flashing that costs $12 and lasts for years. You cannot charge recurring fees for a barrier that, once installed, continues working through rain, through cold, through every season you leave it in place. Sprays require continual reapplication. Pest populations develop resistance over time, which creates recurring demand for new formulations. Patented synthetic chemicals carry higher margins than a generic metal available at any hardware store. The economics here do not require anyone to make a phone call or issue a directive. They are structural. When your revenue depends on bottles emptying and shelves restocking, a one-time physical barrier that outperforms your product at a fraction of the cost is not something you build a marketing campaign around. The extension program shift toward industrial agricultural chemistry after World War II was real and well documented. Research funding followed commercial scale, and commercial scale meant chemistry, not copper strips. No one in that system committed a crime. They simply followed the money, and the money was not pointing at hardware stores. That is not oversight. That is architecture. Deliberate and sustained. Now, here is exactly what to do with copper and zinc barriers in your garden beds. For materials, you need copper flashing or copper tape, available at hardware stores, roofing suppliers, and garden centers for approximately $10 to $25 per roll. You also need galvanized nails or screws, available at farm stores and hardware stores for $3 to $8 per box. Pick up a pair of work gloves. Copper flashing edges are sharp. Step 1, measure the perimeter of each bed or container you want to protect, then cut copper strips to the dimensions you need, each strip 2 to 4 inches tall, enough to deter climbing. Step 2, install the barrier so that 1 to 2 inches of the strip is buried below the soil line and 1 to 2 inches remain exposed above it. The buried portion prevents slugs from finding a gap at the base. The exposed portion is the active surface they will contact. Step 3, complete the encirclement. This is the critical failure point for most installations. The barrier only works if it forms an unbroken ring around the bed. Check every inch.
No gaps. Step 4. Remove all bridges. Check for leaves, mulch, or any plant material that extends over or touches the copper barrier. Slugs and snails will use any physical bridge that bypasses the copper surface. A single overhanging leaf is enough. Watch for this. If a slug or snail reaches the copper and visibly reverses direction without crossing, that is the electrochemical reaction working. You do not need to see a dead slug. The barrier is not a trap. It is a deterrent. Reversal is success. If you see no change in pest activity after 1 week, check 3 things. First, Confirm there are no physical gaps in the barrier. Walk the full perimeter and look for separations or bent sections that have lifted away from the soil. Second, check for bridges, plants, sticks, or mulch that cross the copper line. Third, confirm the copper is making genuine soil contact at the buried edge. If it has been pushed up or shifted, reset it. For maximum safety, do not accelerate copper or zinc dissolution into the soil by adding acidic amendments near the barrier or intentionally submerging metal components in water. Copper and zinc are essential micronutrients at trace levels, but become toxic to soil microbes, earthworms, and plants at elevated concentrations. Monitor soil pH annually if you are using copper barriers in established beds, particularly in acidic or poorly drained soil. Keep the system passive. The barrier works by surface contact, not by releasing metals into your garden at high concentrations.
The cost of this setup runs $20 to $40 one time, covering the copper flashing, galvanized components, and any additional materials. A comparable supply of slug pellets or insecticide spray applied across the same area over a single season can easily exceed that cost and will need to be repeated next spring and the spring after that. Ancient Egyptians recorded it in the Ebers Papyrus in 1550 BCE. Modern researchers at Cornell and UC confirmed the electrochemical mechanism in peer-reviewed literature, and a global industry generating tens of billions of dollars a year built its revenue model on products that need to be repurchased every season. This knowledge did not disappear. Someone made sure it stayed buried. What else do you think got buried the same way? Drop it in the comments. If this video opened something for you, subscribe now. The next vault opens soon. What is inside is even heavier than this.